Hey guys, back at it again, behind the wheel, driving to a doctor's appointment real quick. So I thought I'd shoot a video while I'm sitting here in the car and talk to you guys, give you a little bit more insight on who I am and where I come from. One thing that kind of defined me a lot as a person was when I graduated high school, went directly to the Naval Academy. I was only 17 at the time. My mom and dad had to sign a waiver for me to actually join the Naval Academy because you had to be 18 to be admitted, but you couldn't be 17 if your mom and dad basically signed you over to the government. But at the time I graduated high school, I was living in the Philippines with my mom and dad in old Subic Bay Naval Base in the Philippines. Went to George Dewey High School there. So I had to get from the Philippines to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And this is back in the day when they issued paper airline tickets. So I actually got a couple airline tickets. I think my flight went from Subic Bay we had a layover in Guam for a few hours or a couple hours, and then from Guam to LAX. And then I think from there I went directly to Baltimore. So quite a long day of traveling for me. I traveled by myself. I didn't have my mom or dad come with me, but the good thing is the base was actually getting closed down at the time, and so a lot of people were actually moving back to the States. So I was actually on the plane with a lot of my high school friends, at least all the way until we got to LA. A lot of them deplaned and went their separate ways from there. So I was basically by myself from LA up to Baltimore. The way my tickets were issued, I was supposed to show up. I think induction day for us, which is the first day of like boot camp or plebe summer, what they called it, was July 2nd, 1992. I actually showed up a couple weeks early for some reason. I'm not sure why, but my plane tickets had me on the plane a couple weeks early, so I didn't think anything of it because I was 17. I didn't know any better, and I don't think my parents thought anything of it either. So basically flew by myself all the way to Baltimore. Got out of the plane, got my big sea bag that was filled with a bunch of toiletries and underwear and basic necessities for life. I didn't really need some civilian clothes, so just basically I had a backpack and basically a sea bag with me. I think my dad gave me. Found myself a taxi. Oh, my dad also gave me his credit card. He said if there's any emergencies, but during your travels there, any emergencies, you're free to use this credit card. And then once you're done, just destroy the card, and he'll cancel it and get a new one, I guess. So basically had a couple $100s in cash on me. Took a cab from Baltimore to the Naval Academy, which is about a 45-minute drive, I think, an hour drive, depending on traffic. Got checked in, went to the main office there. So young 17-year-old punk showing up in the main office, a bunch of guys in the military walking around, and I said, I'm here to check in. And there's a lieutenant, an officer behind the desk, and he looked at my orders and said, "You're here way too early, son." And I said, "Well, what do I do?" And he's like, "Well, you can't stay here. We don't have a room for you." So he's like, "But what you can do is I can take you out in town and you can get a hotel room for the next week and a half or so until you're allowed to check back in." And he asked me if I had a credit card, and luckily I had my dad's Visa card with me. So I said, "Yes, sir. I got a credit card right here. My parents gave me." So waited around there for a couple hours. He drove me out in town. I got checked into the Holiday Inn in Annapolis, right next to the mall, and that's where I lived for the next week and a half or so. And keep in mind, though, at the time, it was in 1992. I didn't have a cell phone. My mom and dad didn't have a cell phone. There was no email. At least back then, I didn't have an email address. My parents definitely didn't have an email address. I didn't know anybody in the local area that I could reach out and call. So basically, just took it upon myself to just kind of survive on my own as a 17-year-old kid in a strange place, knowing nobody, and I survived. And that's how I got to be where I basically was free from. I say free. I didn't have my parents to be around. Didn't have them to rely on. Didn't really have them to rely on in the first place. I was basically an independent child ever since I was like a little kid, anyway. But basically, that was my first exposure to the real world, and I guess what people nowadays call adulting. So I was basically adulting in 1992 when I was 17 years old, not even 18 yet. Living in Annapolis in a hotel room for a week and a half, and just kind of fending for myself. Spent a lot of time just sitting in my hotel room watching movies, walked to the mall, just kind of people watched, ate a lot of junk food, ordered some room service every now and then, ordered some pizza, put it on my dad's credit card. Luckily I had that thing. And a few months later my dad wrote me a letter and said, what the hell's with all these charges? And I told him the situation. I had nowhere else to go. I had nothing else I could do besides sit in his hotel room for a week and a half. And I think he understood. And I hope that he forgives me for putting a few $100s on his credit card. But that's how I started off my adult life, starting in the Naval Academy. Then after a week and a half or so, I checked out of the hotel, checked into the Naval Academy, and started my adventures with the Navy. So give you a little bit of background of where I'm coming from. That's kind of like the attitude I had. I wasn't going to sit there and cry about it. I wasn't going to sit there and mope around and say, okay, well, don't know what I'm supposed to do, don't have any ideas. Just kind of like did the whole take charge and move out type thing. So that's kind of the attitude I've had pretty much in my entire life. If I see something that needs to be done, I just kind of jump right in and start doing it, or I try to think of a good way to attack it, and then I start doing it. So you'll probably see a little bit more of that and how I attack things in some of my stories that I'll be telling here in the near future. That's just kind of gives you a little bit of insight on how I think and how I process things, and how what kind of environment I grew up in. Basically being really independent and just kind of doing my own thing. I kind of enjoyed those moments in my life, and that was really a defining moment for myself when I graduated high school and had to go to the Naval Academy by myself. Luckily for me, I wasn't by myself for that long. Once plebe summer started, I was suffering with the rest of the 1,200 people that we started class with. So it was a good experience. I wouldn't have changed things in the world, or I wouldn't have changed things in hindsight. I would have done exactly the same thing, except if I had a cell phone, I probably would have looked up a better hotel to stay in. It wasn't that good of a hotel or a better living situation. So that's it for now. I'll talk to you guys later. And again, if you have any comments or have any defining moments that defined your life as a teenager or as an adult even, comment below or subscribe and let me know what you think, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.